Hello my friends! Welcome to my channel, Lindy's Magpie Reads. If you're new here, I'm Lindy and I read a lot. I also like to do various textile crafts, and most recently my project has been to use kitchen waste, compost scraps basically, to dye yarn, and the final and most recent skein I've done is in orange peels, giving this nice soft yellow color. So now I've got all of my alpaca yarn dyed, and next step is to do some color fast testing on a couple of these skeins that I'm not 100% sure that the color is going to stay the same, and I want to copy this tunic in a knitted pattern that I'm going to design myself. So that's a project that's going to take a while, but if you stick around for a few months you might see the end result. And I've also been doing a little bit of sewing. I have these scraps of fabric that I've dyed in the past few years, and I made myself a little bag for my gym shoes, and I made another bag for knitting project that I'm working on. So, yes. And now for more book-related content. I attended an online conversation with Art Spiegelman. This was part of the Edmonton Public Library Forward Thinking Speakers series, and it took place during Canada's Freedom to Read Week, which is at the end of February. Local author Sandra Wong was asking him open-ended questions that made a really interesting conversation. This is my cat Frida, who's got to come say hello. If you're interested in watching that conversation, it is available online. I will link to the Vimeo video below. And speaking of Edmonton Public Library, I went on a tour of the fairly new Central Library. It reopened in 2020 because of the pandemic. I haven't been there very much, but up on the second floor, the makerspace is amazing, and so that was mainly what the tour was. In the kitchen space, they have a commercial kitchen where they have all kinds of programming, teaching basic cooking skills, and people can use that space if they don't have a commercial kitchen. If they want to sell products that they make, food safety requirements are that it be prepared in a commercial kitchen, which this kitchen satisfies that criteria. There was a fabulous demonstration by James David, a chocolatier, and we had these fabulous pastries. He showed us how he uses a modified record player to make the topping on each one of these tarts. He does fabulous things with chocolates, chocolate sculpture, roses and cabbage. Oh, so pretty. And he showed us how we can make chocolate cups using a balloon that's dipped in chocolate. I learned a lot, but also the other makerspace areas where they have a whole bunch of different 3D printers, and of course they have lots of workshops where you can learn how to use the 3D printers, and die cutting machines that will work on vinyl, and some other ones for wood. There's book making machines, there are sewing machines, there are sound studios that you can reserve, and video and photography studios that are really popular. The night that we were there was the cleaning night, so nobody was in those rooms, so we were able to have a good look. There's a seed library, there's this huge interactive wall. Oh, it's an amazing, amazing space. I am going to get to the books that I have finished recently. I've got 7 to tell you about, including 4 that were part of my Black History Month reading. We're into March already, and one of the BookTube events is March Mystery Madness. Now, I'm not normally a mystery reader, but I can't help hearing about it. I'm currently buddy reading a novel with Marilyn Maya Mendoza, fabulous booktuber, who for the first time this year is one of the hosts of March Mystery Madness. And it's coincidental, though, that I happen to listen to 2 mysteries in audio format. First off, I'm going to tell you about the 3rd in the Aaron Falk mystery series by Jane Harper, Australian mystery writer extraordinaire. This one's called Exiles. It's read by Stephen Shanahan, who has this lovely, warm Australian accent. The story is set in the wine country of southern Australia. You don't have to have read the first 2 books to read this one. It's a couple of cold cases. By the time I got to the 40% mark, I was feeling a bit impatient, thinking, do I really want to continue with this? However, because I've enjoyed every single one of her books in the past, I thought, let's just persevere a little longer. And I'm glad that I did, because this is character-based, a character-based mystery, and I really like where she went with the story, and by the time I was done, I was very, very happy with it. And the second mystery I want to tell you about is actually historical, set in 1758 in what is now Korea. It's written by June Hur. It's called The Red Palace. Hur is a Korean Canadian who was inspired by true historical events to write this. The Crown Prince was accused of murder, and so that actually did happen, but she, made her own completely new story. But the historical detail is really vivid in here, so if you're somebody who really likes setting, you won't be disappointed. It is also a police procedural. It starts off with the murder of 4 young women, and a palace nurse who's 18 and a police officer, I think he's 19, kind of pair up to sort out what happened, because they both know that the wrong person has been accused and is being tortured. And there are more murders that happen, and with this torture as well, lots of violence. This is a YA novel, and there's romance. It's got a fast pace, very rich in historical detail. The audiobook is narrated by Michelle H. Lee. So if you're looking for all those things for March Mystery Madness, historical Korea, murder mystery, police investigation, and romance, it's all in one package there for you. Next up, another Asian Canadian, Jen Sookfong Lee. Her grandfather paid a $500 head tax to come to Canada in 1913, and then had to wait until 1947 for his son to join him in Canada. And that was because Canada had lifted the Chinese exclusion immigration laws. Her memoir is called Superfan, How Pop Culture Broke My Heart. And she is making very astute observations in these series of essays, talking about that interplay between our private lives and the social culture that we live in. So her examples include Anne of Green Gables and the Joy Luck Club and Elizabeth Smart's By Grand Central Station I Sat Down and Wept. She talks about the Bare Naked Ladies and Justin Bieber and the Kardashians and Bob Ross, the painter. She quotes Bob Ross saying, "In painting, you have unlimited power. You have the ability to move mountains. You can bend rivers." And she discovered that she could control things when she was writing. She can control the narrative. She didn't have control over everything else in her life, but that was one thing. Her father died of cancer when she was 12. Her mother went into a deep, deep depression. Jen Sookfong Lee was the youngest of 5 daughters. She talks about the effects of the model minority expectations and anti-Asian racism, the underlying rage that she feels that's related to misogyny and in particular the fetishization of Asian women. It's a really impressive memoir and just very, very well written. I do recommend it. Now these next 4 books are all by African or African American writers, starting with a picture book, The Talk by Alicia Williams and illustrated by Briana Mukodiri Uchendu. The Talk is something that I am familiar with, and you probably are too, because of pop culture, because of books by African American writers like Ta-Nehisi Coates and even James Baldwin, preparing young black boys for dealing with racism and racial profiling. It's told from the viewpoint of a little boy named Jay, and he talks about his friends, his mother measuring him. He's never going to grow up until the day that he's tall enough that his mother worries that they're not going to see him as a young boy anymore. There are wonderful, subtle scenes like this where you can see white people in the background giving them suspicious looks, or when they're in stores, until the point where his parents and grandparents think it's time to give him the talk, and that double-page spread is wordless. And afterwards, the family reassures him that he's done nothing wrong, he's not to blame, that he's the beat of their hearts and the joy in their smiles. A beautiful way to broach the topic with very young readers, preschool all the way up to probably grade 2 or 3, for children of all kinds of backgrounds. Next up, an audiobook, The Door of No Return by Kwame Alexander. This is historical fiction, and it's written in verse, set in 1860 in the Ashanti Kingdom, in the area that's now Ghana. And The story focuses on an 11-year-old boy, Kofi. We get to know his daily life, and this place and this period really comes alive. And then tragedy strikes to do with a wrestling competition and his older brother. And then Kofi is taken by slavers and put on a ship. And the story is the first in a trilogy. It ends in the middle passage. I was really curious who the intended audience is for this book. So I looked into reviews and on the publisher's website, the Little Brown website, where they have it in their children's category, juvenile fiction. Now, children's literature is like an umbrella that can encompass YA and everything from that all the way down to word books. But in this case, on that publisher's website, they have an entirely separate category for YA. So it's definitely what the publisher considers a children's book. And the author himself said that he had his 12-year-old daughter in mind when he was writing this. So the extreme violence, the deaths, the torture, rape that occur in this book, because it's written in a poetic style, that helps make it less harsh and intimidating. And Alexander himself said he kept asking himself how to express some of these ugly things in a way that his daughter wouldn't be utterly destroyed by it. So it's a book for age 10 and up. Be aware of the content if you are interested in sharing this with young people. Next up is a book that I read for my Lesbian Plus book club. And as you can see, there was lots to talk about, lots of flags. Sky Falling by Mia McKenzie. This is her second novel. I actually really liked her debut called something, The Summer We Got Free, I think was her debut. And this one won the Lambda Literary Award for Lesbian Fiction last year. Skye is a central character. She is a woman who is so internally repressed. She runs away from emotional involvement. But when she was in her 20s and needed some money, she donated an egg to a woman who couldn't get pregnant. Now she's nearly 40, and the child who started out as that egg has tracked her down, and so she gets involved in her life. It's told in first person. It is set in Philadelphia. Philadelphia is practically a character in here. There's lots of African-American vernacular English. Skye's internal monologue is kind of like stand-up comedy, which it's probably best if I read a sample to give you an idea. In her inner mind, she calls this guy Captain Interrupting Pants. Here's a section where she's having a heart-to-heart with her brother, sitting on the porch of his home, and she asks if he has bourbon, and he shakes his head. Nah, I have some scotch though. It's not too peaty. I agree to scotch. He goes inside and brings it out in a coffee mug. I take a drink. It's peaty as hell. Like licking the mossy side of a tree. Like what you'd expect a hobbit's butthole to taste like, if you happen to be part of the ass-eating community of the Shire. But I have a rule, that I never complain about free liquor. Yeah, so much wisecracking that I actually got pretty impatient with her as a character, but I kept reading because it was my book club book, and in the end I actually was won over by Skye. She does go through a change. I did appreciate her narrative arc. Yeah, quite a memorable heroine. My favorite book of all of these that I've told you about was one that I picked up for the Book Naturalist book club that Heidi of My Reading Life and Doris of Aldi Books have been organizing for a few years now. It's called A Bigger Picture, and it's by Vanessa Nakate, who is a Ugandan climate activist. But before I tell you about it, look how similar the colors are on these two covers. Heidi did an excellent standalone review of this book. I will link to her review below. It's not a long book. It's full of facts. It's emotionally moving. Vanessa Nakate really came into public focus when she was at a climate conference in Davos, Switzerland, with 4 other young activists. And the photo that was taken of these 5, she was cropped out, the only black member of the group. So her personal experiences, together with the bigger picture that's set in the title, what's happening in her own country and in other African countries, the people who have contributed the least towards climate change are the ones that are affected the most. She talks about dealing with burnout. She talks about positive steps that individuals can make. So I actually found this very uplifting and inspiring. She talks about how courage is contagious, and it's just the kind of book that I needed right now. I feel like I've had a sort of fatalistic attitude towards the world going to hell in a handbasket, basically. Human race is not going to survive for very long. Our earth is going to be cockroaches and ants, basically. But I have more hope after reading this. Oh, there goes a fire truck. There's Joni singing along. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate any comments that you've got for me. Let me know what you think of any of these books and what you've been reading lately. And I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.